All right, I think we're live. Let's check and make sure. Should show up here in a second, but I think we are running. Hey everybody, how are you this morning? My name is Abby McCulley. I'm here with Church Communications, and I'm here with my friend Justin. Justin serves as the Director of Partnerships at Subsplash. He has over 2 decades of church leadership and pastoral ministry experience. Justin is very passionate about the gospel, about discipleship beyond just Sundays, and partnering with the global church to see God's kingdom come. So thank you, Justin, for being here with us. We are so excited to have you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Abby. It's an honor to be here, and grateful for the opportunity to share a little bit about Subsplash and our vision and mission. But even more than that, how do we help equip churches to meet the very real demands of discipleship beyond Sundays, which is kind of where every church finds themselves today.
Yes, it's a very important issue, and we're super excited to be partnering with y'all to learn more about it because, especially as the holiday season is approaching, this is just a very, very important topic.
Yeah, and I would say, the focus of today's webinar really is around giving and what does donor discipleship look like, which is really the phrase that we use internally here at Subsplash, right? We're not fundraising. We're not, we're not building giant budgets. We are helping people on their journey of discipleship through the act and the worship of giving of their tithes and offerings. And so, as we approach the Christmas season and through the holidays, this is undoubtedly, by every statistic, the most generous time of the year for most Americans, and specifically for those that maybe attend church just a handful of times a year. The Christmas season is one that offers a lot of opportunities for people to re-engage with their faith, but not just with their faith, also their family of faith, and then be introduced to different pathways forward on what it looks like to follow Jesus in practical ways. And so, looking forward to help to spur on some of that conversation, discussion around what does the giving journey look like for people as they enter into churches this season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that phrase, donor discipleship. I've not ever heard that term before. And I think a lot of times we can forget that that is a discipleship issue. So can you maybe talk a little bit about how generous giving is related to discipleship and how you guys kind of view that and talk about it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I've been a pastor for a number of years, and I can say this anecdotally, but I can also say this just through years of working with other churches and ministries as well, that generosity isn't something that is activated or even happens by accident. It's something that's cultivated. It's something that is expressed and talked about through the values of what the church represents, and not just what the local church or local chapter of the body of Christ represents, but really what the gospel embodies. I mean, all the way back down to the most famous of all of the sports signs is John 3:16, for God so loved that he gave. And so this is just really tied into the DNA of who we are as Christ followers, that if we are to love God and love our neighbor, as the great command asks us to do or tells us to do, then generosity should be a natural overflow of that love that we have for God and for others. And so that's a journey, though, that isn't just reinforced by a couple of statements once a week. It's something that's reinforced and cultivated by an ongoing conversation, commitment to values, commitment to partnerships and communities, and a commitment to communicating where the church is putting its resources to help people see how their giving goes beyond paying for salaries and buildings and everything that makes Sundays run.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, like a broader issue, like you're saying. It's something that can't just be like a one and done. It has to be worked through and talked about often. It has to be cultivated, and that has to start with your leadership, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, it also goes back to some fundamentals, frankly, that if I can be so bold to say for our audience here, the church has been reoriented back to some of the foundations and fundamentals of what we're all about as a result of the pandemic. There's been massive restructuring and reshaping of the value of what Sundays even mean, as people have not been able to attend churches, and even as services and churches have opened up their doors in full effect. The national averages right now are around maybe between 40 to 50% capacity, even though the doors are fully open again, which means that we have to relook at how we're engaging people. And this really goes back to the conversation or this thought around what are we doing beyond Sundays? And so let me leave us with a number here before we get into more specifics of giving. But think about this number for a second. That number is 168. 168 is the number of hours that an average person has, or every person has, in the life of a week. So in one week, Sunday through Saturday, you have 168 hours. In that 100, now that doesn't include the 8 hours that you're sleeping. Hopefully, maybe 8 hours if you're getting that. If you have children, maybe you get 6 hours. I don't know.
Right.
I have kids. I get maybe 5 to 6 hours of sleep. But 168 hours. Most of those hours are dominated by somebody's smartphone, which, statistics, if you even look at your own usage stats that pop in, at least on my iPhone every Sunday morning, showing how much time I've spent daily on my smartphone. Maybe yours is somewhere, I don't know, 5-6 hours a day, maybe. Then you compound that with Disney Plus, Netflix, YouTube on your TV app or on your laptop. We are consuming a tremendous amount of content, and companies have figured out that engagement to be effective and viable has to go beyond one-time events, and they have to find ways to fill in all the cracks between work, family time, everything else to dominate your time and ultimately generate funds for their business. And I think this is honestly something that the church can look at if we're looking at not obviously raising funds. That's not what we're doing, but we're helping people in their journey beyond Sundays. The pandemic really kind of put everything on its head, where we have been so Sunday focused as the Western church, putting all our eggs in a basket. I mean, as a pastor, I would spend probably, 80% of the time throughout the week in our staff gearing up and preparing for Sundays, worship practices, message prep, volunteer coordination, running through the service plans and everything else that we're doing to make an hour and a half go. And so the way that most churches have looked at engaging somebody throughout their week is we have 168 hours that we have an opportunity to help lead people through digital means. We have put all of our concentration on maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours once a week, leaving 166 hours open generally for everybody else to come in and use those people's times effectively. I think the gospel is probably the greatest cause that we could ask anybody to join, and that is a holistic ask, everything from their time to the way that they live their lives, which includes that journey of discipleship and through giving. And so one of the things that I appreciate about Subsplash so much, having been a part of this organization for the better part of 3 years now, and I was a client of Subsplash long before I came to work here in the churches that I was a part of, but Subsplash sees giving as a valuable and necessary part of the discipleship journey, but it's not the entirety of the discipleship journey. And I think as we help churches create content that's meaningful, and our platform is designed to help keep people engaged through the means and the ways and the technological platforms that people are spending the most time in, you'll see generosity start to rise as a direct result of the way that we care for people beyond Sundays. And that's what we're committed to here at Subsplash.
Absolutely. And that is so amazing. A lot of the churches that we've been working with lately, we've actually been talking about this idea that the pandemic has changed everything. It's not a Sunday only mindset anymore. Yep. And we need to make things convenient and accessible for people, right? Because that's what we're used to. I can pick up my phone and watch anything I want, whenever I want. And so there's kind of this shift to where church should be the same way. We should be producing content that's easy and accessible for people to meet them where they're at. And so I'm super excited to hear about Subsplash's, focus on that. I think that's very, very important and very necessary right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I would say, as we kind of maybe refocus back on the giving portion of what this conversation specifically is on is, I know that obviously we are dependent as the church on people's sacrificial giving to some degree, and as as we are looking especially to engage people in this biggest season of generosity, I think there's a few things that we can do as a church to make that journey easier for people. At the end of the day, digital giving, I remember years ago, and this, maybe will show me how old I am, but, my wife and I used to write checks out in the middle of our services, and we would hold hands before the moment of giving, and we would hold our check in our hand, and then we would pray over that moment and ask God to bless it, and then we would drop it in the offering container as it went down the row, and that was our moment to give in the service. And over the years, as digital giving has dominated the way people choose to give. I know a lot of pastors initially were reluctant to engage in digital giving because the last thing you want to do is commoditize, or what feels like a commoditizing of an act of worship. That's really not what it is, though. People have just found other ways, and eventually we would still hold our hands, pray over our gift, my wife and I, and then hit submit on our app, and then give our tithes and offerings, digitally, and it didn't take away from the act of giving at all, or the worship of that moment. It just made it a little bit easier, and then allowed us to do that anywhere that we wanted to, frankly. And so that's really what these digital tools have allowed people to do, is enter into those moments of worship. And we're not commoditizing people's giving. We are just removing as many barriers as possible to make that journey for somebody as easy as possible to be a part of the vision and the mission of what they're a part of.
Exactly. We definitely want to make it easy as it can be. And so moving forward in this conversation, could you maybe talk a little bit about some mistakes that people make? Because giving is kind of like a tricky issue. Sometimes some pastors don't know how to approach it, or maybe someone is interested in trying to cultivate that mentality around giving in their church. So what would you say are some of the biggest mistakes that you guys see often?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say probably the biggest one would be misalignment. And what I mean by misalignment is this is when the vision of the church, or the leadership of the church, or the staff of the church have a different idea of what generosity is than what the congregation sees as the reality of what generosity is, and recognizing what is actually necessary as in sacrifice to becoming more like Christ, which again, giving financially is a big portion of that. As Jesus says, where your heart is, there your treasure is also. Or right. You can flip that around the other way. Where your treasure is, that is where your heart is. It reveals the things that you care most about, where you put your finances. And so oftentimes we find that misalignment between the vision, or the communication of that vision, or the expectation of what leadership of a church is actually communicating may be different than what their congregation is hearing, receiving, or thinking about what generosity looks like. And so I would go back and if you're finding a disconnect, and there's been some churches throughout the course of the pandemic that have seen a spike in giving, and that's great. Probably they've seen that spike, number one, because people have been able to see the ways that the church has been generous even without Sunday service attendance, or they've seen a spike in giving because they already had digital giving in place, right? So if that's the case, and you have, good on you. If you haven't, no problem. That's why we're here, right? So we'd be happy to have a conversation with you here at Subsplash and help your church do that. I work with many denominations, across the church landscape globally. We've been honored to serve and partner with thousands of churches and help them with their giving journeys. So again, we can do that for you and get that up in less than a day, by the way. So if you're thinking like, this is too hard, how do I do this? We can have digital giving in place for you before the day is over. So feel free to reach out to us. We'll make that happen for you. But I would say that misalignment is a big one. So go back, look at the vision that you have, look how you're communicating that vision, look at the ways in which you're communicating that vision. If you're just constantly making asks for financial contribution, but we're not teaching the value or how it's tied into the discipleship journey as a whole, or we're focusing too much on the giving, then there could be a problem there, and maybe put up some red flags for people who are attending for the first time. The other thing I would say this, when it comes to maybe misalignment as well, we talked a little bit about cultivation. It takes time for people when they start attending church to trust the church, to know what the mission and the vision of the church is, to truly feel like that they have personally bought into that, or can align themselves with that before they start giving. Statistically, that is probably around a 6-month journey is what most data points are pointing to. And so if you've got maybe an influx of people coming to your church for the first time as the pandemic has settled down, recognize that it may take about 6 months for somebody, by the time they start coming, by the time they actually give financially for the first time. So have patience with yourself and your team. But the way that they're going to do that is not by just making asks or making desperate pleas for finances. It's going to be overemphasizing the vision and mission, and showing where the finances are going, again, beyond the building, staff, and the requirements to keep the house running. And if we can do that, I think you'll find that there's more of an alignment and an understanding of where you're going as an organization and as a church, and people will be happy to partner in that way.
Definitely. You definitely want to have everyone on the same page, especially as you're moving forward to try to create this entire new mentality around it. Would you say that you think that people have correct information about online giving, about giving in general? Do you think there's a little bit of a disconnect there as well?
Yeah, I think so. Misinformation is a popular term right now, a buzzword in our culture.
Right.
And so usually that I would say that would apply to the church as well. I would say make it really clear about where you're spending your money. So that, again, people can trust that they can give into something. As much as this is a journey for every Christ follower to embark on, and we want to make that part clear, people also just want to make sure that the money is being used in a way that is beneficial. And again, that ties down to how you're communicating mission and vision. The church that we just started attending, we relocated last year to a new city in the middle of a pandemic. My family did. And it was a challenge finding a church. I'm not going to lie. We did land at one here that we really do like. One of the things that has been neat that they've done every single Sunday is before they even talk about giving, and by the way, that portion of the service is literally 30 seconds. So that's been interesting to see how they do that. But they always say, if you want to partner with us in this way, we just want you to know that at a minimum, 25% of everything that comes in goes back out to our local missions to make sure that we are loving our neighbors well. And they had that as a statement that has been repeated over and over and over again. We've been there for a couple months now, heard it every single Sunday. And it's made us, even as somebody who has pastored churches, has made those asks of people, now sitting and attending, maybe for the first time in a while, if I'm just being candid, as an attender, to listen to how that is being communicated and how it actually builds my trust to know. I mean, I know that there's needs of the church from a staff perspective. I know that there's a mortgage on the building that needs to be paid, electricity that needs to go on, communion. I mean, I know that there's practical needs that need to be met. But it is so good to know that the church is fulfilling the Great Commission of not just loving people, but loving your neighbor. Right. Actually, if I can just stop there for a second, because I think this goes back to how we communicate the mission and the vision of what we do. If I can just get on a soapbox for a moment, the great commandment that Jesus gave to us in Matthew or in Mark chapter 12, same thing, right? Is to, we've often distilled that to love God and love people. I hear that probably in every podcast, Sunday sermon on YouTube that I would watch or on Facebook or whatever. That's not actually the great commandment. The great commandment is to love God and love your neighbor. There's a big distinction between loving people and loving neighbors. I can, as a person, think that I can give to the Red Cross, let's say, and I have loved people. I've done my service to humanity because those funds are going to go to a relief effort. I've loved people. I've done my. You're done. That's not what the Great Commandment is. It's to love your neighbor. If I'm to love my neighbor, I have to know my neighbor. It means I have to get involved in the mess of my neighbor's life. I have to be bold enough to go knock on the door and introduce myself. I have to get to know their kids' names. I maybe have to have dinner with them once a year, or something like that, just to care for them. I can't love really who I don't know. And so I would say for the churches, as we're unpacking this, if we're giving people opportunities to serve their neighbor, and we show that the money that they're giving is going to partner with their neighborhood, not just general causes. Yeah, we want to be impacting on a global scale. I get that as well. But if we help people tie to how their funds are helping people in their own backyard and how they can be a part of the solution to their actual neighbors, that is going to go a long way to not just fulfilling the Great Commandment that we've been given, but also engaging people's hearts into the very local, tangible, and practical aspect of our Christianity. And that's a powerful way to communicate and have people partner with the mission of the church.
I think that is a super important distinction. And you're right. I've heard the love God, love people slogan 100 times. But that's a very, very important way to think about that our neighbor is not the same as just all people in general. Right. So would you say that there are opportunities available to love our neighbors and opportunities available to church leadership that maybe they're kind of missing out on?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously that's going to be contextual when it comes to the kind of programming, services, local missions that any church does. You're going to want to meet local needs. When it comes to the digital or the giving side of the component, I would say probably the biggest opportunity that every church has to help make this easy for people to dive into that digital giving journey, make it a digital giving journey. Put the emphasis on that. is, again, we're not trying to commoditize, anybody's act of worship or sacrificial giving. And yet at the same time, we have been accustomed to 2-click checkout on an Amazon app. We've been accustomed to 2-click checkout on a Walmart app. And suddenly 2 taps and I've got something coming in a day. And that's incredible. For some reason, we have not quite embraced that as the church. And again, I work with a lot of historic denominations. It's still one of the biggest challenges 18 months after really the pandemic had started. Churches are still, to some degree, unwilling to fully embrace a digital giving solution. And I will say this, the more barriers that we can eliminate for people and make that journey easy for people, the more apt they're going to want to step in and do it. Again, we've been conditioned by the big app developers who have spent multi-million dollars on their apps to make those experiences absolutely delightful for people to engage in business. Now, again, we're not doing that as the church. And yet at the same time, I think there's a lesson to be learned there. How are we engaging people and making this simple for them to partake so that they don't have to get in their car and drive to the church on Wednesday since they can't attend the service on Sunday, or they may be nervous for safety reasons to enter into a public worship space. What can we do to make that journey for people really, really easy? So I think that would be the big thing. Figure out how that digital journey can be made easy, how it can be accessible. If it's just on your website, I would say that's a big missed opportunity. When it comes to the engagement portion, one of the things that's made Subsplash, I think, so great for churches in general over the years is because we have digital spaces that occupy everywhere that people want to go. So whether it's mobile apps, which are the primary way that people engage with any organization, whether it's websites, whether it's TV apps, live streaming, in-app group messaging for organic, real-time chat between community groups and things that are happening throughout there's just so many different ways that we can do that. And then we have giving available and through all those different ways as well to make that super simple as well. So not only do you want to have the digital giving opportunities available, make them available everywhere that your people are going to be as well, so it's very clear on what people need to do. Most churches still, when I go to websites, have not made that digital journey across the board for people to engage in the life of their church very easy. Think about it this way. Your website really is an online billboard for your church. People are usually going off of a Google search. If they don't know who you are, they're going to land on your website and they're looking for a handful of basic pieces of information. They want to know where your service is, what time does it start, who's the leadership, what's your statement of faith, is there a sermon that I can watch, and can you take care of my kids? Those are the five or six things that people want to know. Make that very simple. If you're doing online church, make that front and center on your website so people know how to engage if they don't feel comfortable attending in person. But once people join the life of your community, they'll probably never go back to your website again. And that's not a bad thing, but it's just served its purpose. And that's where mobile apps do the heavy lifting. So now somebody's going to download a mobile app. They'll engage with the discipleship content, whether it's a Bible reading plan or an event registration or digital giving, a live streaming, a media library, whatever that is that you want to do to offer and showcase those resources. People who are connected to you are going to use apps, and they'll prefer apps 9 out of 10 times. So if you don't have a mobile app for your church, we have a platform that makes it easy to get up and running in hours. And so again, we can help you do that and then include digital giving in there as well, so people can incorporate these easy next steps into very accessible ways. And I would say if you've got those tools in place, it's very easy to start building strategies and calls to action around that, because you have very easily accessible places for people to engage in those moments.
Definitely. Yeah. Just providing that clarity, I think, is so helpful for people, especially like you said, new people or visitors who don't exactly know what to expect. Maybe they don't know the whole church lingo. So just making that really clear for them. And I'm a personal example. I actually used to attend a church that they did no online giving. It was strictly, the envelopes and the checks, and you put it in like you mentioned. And then I started attending my new church about 2 years ago, and I went online and saw that they had online giving with Subsplash. And the whole process was super easy. And so I got my profile and everything set up. And now I can do it from my phone, whether I'm at church or not at church. If I want to sit down and do all of my, payment stuff at once, it was so convenient. And I was like, wow, this is so easy. Like all churches should be doing this for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no reason that that you can't have a great digital engagement platform in place, and then obviously for people who wanted to give financially, whether it's a grandparent who's tuning into their grandkids' church this Christmas and then just wants to give. Make that really easy for that grandparent to give online in a way that they can do that. Here's the other thing that I would say, though, from the church administrative perspective.
Right.
It's one of the things that we found, that I found working with, again, dozens and dozens of denominations that represent thousands of churches across Christendom. Right now, what the pandemic did was realize that make churches realize we have to have some kind of digital offering in place. And so what lots of churches started scrambling to do was to duct tape like 9 different solutions together,
right.
and then to try to create one seamless experience on the front end for their congregations who were coming in. And what they ended up doing is creating a nightmare for the staff on the back end that have to manage all 9 of those platforms with not just multiple logins, but trying to connect all those through code and back end, things. And that's just brutal, especially when it comes to giving. There's so many records that are necessary and all the data that goes into making sure that people's giving is tracked well and then given in end of year statements. We can take care of all of that for you. But the thing that Subsplash does that's so brilliant is we are truly an all-in-one solution. So that means, nobody went to seminary to learn code. I certainly didn't go to Bible college to learn code. And so I don't want to connect all those back-end systems or have my staff do that. Subsplash has got an all-in-one front-end and back-end solution as well. We just launched Subsplash 1, which is bringing in a great tide of back-end people management as well. That will even enhance the giving journey and start tracking people's trends in their giving as well.
Oh, wow.
So you have real-time data and analytics on why people are giving, where they're giving, when they're giving, and how to engage those givers even in more meaningful ways. And so all of that data becomes useful for churches now, where these aren't disparate systems that you've just band-aided together to help stem the bleeding of COVID-19 in your church, but you're actually building strategies around how to be more effective in engaging your givers, again, in a meaningful way and getting them more customized calls to action as they're moving forward. These are powerful tools that any church can use, and we're going to help you onboard and do that. But here's the last thing I'd say, because I know we got just a few minutes left. I would say, having used multiple systems as a pastor myself, the giving fees can add up very quickly. And maybe if you're a church that jumped into using some kind of Band-Aid solution, or just because you needed something over the course of 2020 and 2021, or maybe you're reevaluating your long-term strategy because you're realizing that your tools aren't built to scale or grow with you. The giving is one that I would relook at where you're spending your fees. Subsplash, I'm grateful to say, is because we honor the tithe and we honor the fact that this is somebody's act of worship and sacrifice. We have some of the lowest fees in the industry, and we have built this in a way to put more money back in the hands of churches. So we have something called Grow Curve, where as your digital giving goes up as a church, your rate actually goes down per transaction.
Wow.
And we have given millions of dollars back to churches over the last couple of years, back into the hands of churches to help fund that mission and fuel those missions that churches are on. Because again, we don't want this caught up in fees. The reality is that most people are probably per dollar that's being given right now are somewhere in the neighborhood of 3.5% to 4%, sometimes higher, when you're all said and done. And that's called an effective rate. So I would go back and look at your effective rate and see, is it really that effective when it comes to how people are giving and where those fees are going. So we're going to release those fees and try to get money back to churches with with Grow Curve, but we also come in with some of the lowest starting point fees out of anybody. There's no monthly cost. It's just included also with your subscription if you've got an app or website with us as well. So we're going to make that really easy for churches, not just to get up and rolling with the platform itself, but also with the fees. We're going to reduce those so much. We've had churches be able to fund water projects in other countries with the savings.
Wow.
Add more staff to their churches because they've saved tens of thousands of dollars a year just on the fees alone. So Take a look at what your current solution is. We can help you go from a piecemeal Band-Aid solution to an all-in-one while reducing your costs overall. And we're going to partner with you to help fuel your mission in incredible ways as the church moves forward.
Well, that is fantastic. And this has been such an amazing conversation. I've really enjoyed hearing from you, Justin, and I'm sure that everyone in the community has as well. Could you tell them maybe what's the next step if they want to check out Subsplash or maybe get in touch with you? What is the best way for them to move forward if they're looking for, the next step?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for asking. Yeah, we'd love to have a conversation for anybody watching here today that would like to figure out more. We our ministry consultants are ready to do just that, consult with you about what your ministry looks like. And so if you have any questions, and by the way, there are so many entry points into our platform with options to upgrade later. So if you just need live streaming, we can do it. If you need a website, we can do it. If you need a mobile app or just giving by itself, we can do it for you. In fact, for those who are watching this, we'll just give our giving platform away to you at no cost monthly. If you're watching this, it's just being a part of this communications group community. And so if you need a giving solution but you're nervous about monthly fees, reach out to us and we'll get you set up at no monthly cost for our giving platform. That's full data management on the back end, as well as a very seamless tool that you can plug into your website today to help people give. But go to subsplash.com. And you'll see a Let's Chat button there at the bottom of the homepage. Just click on that, and we'll get you in touch with one of our ministry consultants, today or in the next couple of days, and get you up and running by Sunday.
Well, perfect. That sounds amazing. That is so generous, and I'm so grateful for everything that you guys are doing, the ways that you are partnering with the churches all over the country, all over the world. I don't know how far your reach is, but it sounds like you really are creating a new conversation around giving, creating an idea of engaged generosity. And I'm just so glad to hear that.
Yeah, thank you. It's been an honor chatting with you today, and I look forward to talking with you in the communications group community.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Justin.
Have a great one.